The month of Av, I think I wrote about it in the lesson tonight, or maybe that was last week. You know, they do run together a little bit in your mind when you're the one getting them ready, and you're like, I'm doing my best to get this week's ready last week, but then the busyness, anyway, it is what it is. I love it, enjoy it.
Does that calendar have stuff on it? I've heard people talking about the 9th of Av,
Hmm.
and I
It's
don't
on
know.
here.
It is on there.
Uh-huh. The 9th of Av was Sunday, Saturday, or Sunday. The 9th of Av, I think, is in the notes tonight. Is it? Tonight's note? You'll learn about it tonight. So, in the Hebrew year, Jewish calendar, if you want to look at it that way, there's really more than one. There's the one that's in the Bible, and the one that's in the Bible only has numbers. So it's month 1, month 2, on down the line. Okay? But later on, when the Judah went to Babylon, Jews went to Babylon, while they were in Babylon, they borrowed names and named all the months. So the months that are on this calendar have the months that were named while they were in Babylon. One of those months is the month of Av. Okay? And it is believed by the rabbis that during the month of Av, on the 9th day of Av, is when Israel was at the borders of the land, and God had commanded them to go into the land, and they said, we are not going in there because there are a bunch of giants, and Joshua and Caleb said, no, we can go in, and Israel rebelled and said, we're not going into the land, and God was like, all right, then you're going to die on the wilderness. That happened on the 9th of Av. Okay, and then later in the history of the Jews, things have happened on the 9th of Av that are, what's the word? Tragedies have happened on the 9th of Av. And like the destruction of the temple, both times, I believe. And, things like that. The Jews were kicked out of Spain on the 9th of Av. And, of course, Columbus has something to do with all that. Christopher Columbus, being most likely a messianic believer and of Jewish background. I think his mother was Jewish. Anyway, things you don't know, things you don't realize. You don't realize how many people have Jewish lineage, not just from Israel, but literally Jewish lineage, but you wouldn't know it because their names, they unHebrewized their names because they didn't want it to be known, because they're everywhere they go, they were persecuted. So there's, Jewish people whose names are Evans and Williams and stuff like that, and you're like, well, that's not a Jewish name. Well, my great-great-grandfather was William Steen or something like that, so I thought that was interesting. Okay, I'll say it again so that everybody knows. These are the calendars for the next year, the Hebrew and English calendar with all of the dates of the Moedim, that's the holy days on them, and Shabbats, and it even has our readings on them listed. Every Shabbat gives you the reading for the next week. These are $10, and they have nice photos of Israel. I think they're all in Israel this year. So if anybody wants one of those, I can make that happen tonight, either right now or later. And we'll be doing this again on Friday night and whenever. Mark Belt's El Shaddai. Yes. Yes. Now, would you do me a favor, Mark, and hand those out? Just hand one of those out to everybody. Hello, online people. Right now, we're going to be looking at this journal. That's a Bible journal, Bible reading journal, that you have verses that are here, and then you read, and then you write something that you've learned as soon as those get handed out. How are you guys all doing? You made it. Skip moment is gone. And we are all alive. We made it. We made it. We made it.
This is about that Tish
Tish B'Av, sunset, Saturday. It's correct.
and Jan
Yes.
in reference to the baby.
Communal mourning. That's right. Yep. That's right.
I didn't know about the Lamentations and the
Yeah, it's tradition. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Right now,
so I want to
that happens.
those up and check them out.
There you go. Feel like I'm doing business.
For a 20.
Yes, I do now. I certainly do. We will on Friday night. Oh, you know what? There you go. An IOU, and I will remember.
Well, you know what I do is I
Friday night.
enter Monica's keyboard.
Oh, that works.
I just gave all my
Yeah, yeah. I'll remember because of the rainbow. The rainbow will help me remember. Thank you. Thank you. All right, what you got handed out, what you've been handed out is a little, it's a devotion book. This is what it looks like. This is my wife's. She got it last year. And what it is it has Bible readings, and then it has somewhere where you write, just if you learned anything or however you want to do that. There's different ways of journaling. She has a way of journaling. And they go right along with our Torah readings, meaning that every day, like this week we're doing Devarim, Deuteronomy 1 through 3. So what it does is it breaks those up into the whole week. So every day you read a little bit, okay, of that reading. And then it adds in readings from the rest of the Tanakh and the New Testament, so that in 1 year of reading through the Torah, you will literally have read the whole Bible in a year. And you can write little notes and things like that. So I'm going to just let you look at this. I'm going to hand it out and pass it around. And I don't know, you might not want to read my wife's notes, but I don't think she'd mind. They're, that is not at Vine and Branches. That will be something that you will order via me. So I have a paper here, and if you want one of these, all right, I believe that if we can get 20 of them sold, they'll be $20 each for that journal. So I'm just going to hand that out with something to write with here. And if you're interested, just write down your name and your email and how many of those journals that you would like. And if you don't want one, that's fine. Ooh, I'm going to get one, and I thought it would really be neat in here. Because we'd be able to, on the one hand, it will help you be motivated. Excuse me. Motivated. Oh, man, I'm going to read this week. And if you miss, what's nice about it, if you miss a day, the next day's reading is it's not much, the Torah element of it. And then if you write notes, maybe when we get together on Wednesday nights, we can hear a little bit of what one another learned during the week by what you wrote down. So that's an idea, and you can make it happen by signing your name. And then we'll make the order, and then when they're in, I'll just hand it to you, and you give me the $20. Works like that. So you don't have to order it ahead. Okay? Questions about that? What you eating? They will. I believe that that one, that's my wife's, begins like January 1, but it goes a year and a half, and she jumped. Yes, by the beginning of next year's reading cycle, which is October. When are you leaving? It would be maybe. That's a maybe. I don't know, maybe. Skip. Oh. I eat those. All meat, I mean beef or moose bacon. A moose bacon. Those are Dave. Yeah. Dave makes really good moose bacon. Yep. Or if you, what we did last year is we did our own, moose burger and roasts and all that, and then we had the leftovers, and we brought it to Indian Valley Meats, and we had hot dogs and teriyaki sticks, and we could have had bacon, but we didn't get that done this year. But no, not yet, almost. And I only had a third of one because I had a third, and Elizabeth had a third, and then somebody else had a third. So, one moose will do a bunch. Your normal moose has 4 legs. Wait. Yeah. Once you have all the meat carved up, then you divide it up, smart guy. You have to get a moose that only has 3 legs. And then you can divide them up easily into thirds. Oh, I love you guys. What a group.
So how many cheeseburgers can you get out of a moose?
A lot. A bunch. I don't know, but a bunch. All right, well, let's go ahead and think. I would like to know, and we're going to do Friday night, I'm going to be doing a follow-up on Skip Moen and the weekend, okay, the Beyond Translation Conference. Good to know. Thank you. Which is one of the things that I want to know, and I've had a lot of people giving me input. Most of it has been not negative; it's been good, but it's been words like challenging. And that makes me very happy. Okay? Why? Because I like growth. And there's no way to grow if you don't have challenges along the way. I will give you an example. About 10 years ago, this lady right here, Patty, walked in the room to the back there, and she had a book written by a guy named Todd Bennett. And your words were something like, oh, I don't know, this is really, And I was like, well, I need to get one, and I need to read it. So you get that, and you read that, and if anybody's read Bennett, and you're new to the Hebraic walk, it's like, bam, with a baseball bat, and you're like, no, everything I'm doing is wrong. It's not easy, okay? Skip is a little bit like that. Although his knife slides in a bit easier. That's what I noticed. I leaned over at Gail at one point in the conference, and I said, well, he just slid that knife in, and it had oil on it, didn't it? Because of his personality and everything. But I thought maybe we'd take a couple minutes, and what I would like to know is, number one, I don't want to know if you enjoyed it or not. Okay? Fine or whatever. That's not... what I want to know is, did you learn anything? And if you did, do you remember something that you learned from the conference, other than what kind of guy Skip is or whatever? What did you learn? Okay, wait, we have a mic. I'm going to turn it on and hand it back. You know the drill. No.
I'm not good with it.
Go ahead.
Well, first off, there is not one man walking this earth that's 100% correct. So
Yes. You're right.
Or woman.
Or woman.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so we took, what we said is we took the chaff and the wheat together, and we let the winds take the chaff and
That's
blow
what
it
you
away, and we got some nuggets. But some cool things that I thought, and I'm not going to be critical about the stuff that you don't need to hear that. Relationship came before text. I liked that sentence
Yep.
because it's true.
Well, it is.
Relationship was there. Yeah. And text is vital. This is something we've treasured and we loved. And when I first entered into a belief in relationship, my desire for the word was insatiable.
Yep.
So I can't, in my mind, cast that off.
Oh, no.
I mean, it's not. It is rich and it's full, and I'm thinking, wow, I do not trust oral tradition with quotes around it because, again, it's men, and you know what I'm saying, mankind, talking and contemplating, discussing, throwing it back and forth. There's some truth, there's some
Right.
nuggets of truth, but there's a lot of stuff that's based on untruth. And so I think all of us through this whole conference need to have a discerning spirit for
course.
truth and let him go, let him teach. But meanwhile, it's not like we have to embrace everything that came out of his mouth.
Yes.
That's where we're at.
Good. And listen, it ought to be that way with everybody.
Yeah.
It ought to be that way with me.
Well,
Okay.
listen, though, when you said, "Oh, I'm so sorry," when I asked about the olive top.
Oh,
I
we're going to
said,
look at
"Listen,
that
Pat,
tonight.
I will embrace. Yeah, I know it's in
I
here.
did more reading. Yeah, when I find out that something's, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'll have to go back and read a little bit more. And I did, and you'll learn about that tonight.
Yeah,
So,
I've already read the notes, but yeah.
good. And something else, if may I add to your, all right. And I'm not adding in order to sweep rugs out or put knives in, all right? But you realize that everything in the Bible was once an oral tradition. Even in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That was once oral, okay? Because Israel was an oral culture, as were most of the ancient Near East cultures. They were oral. But their way and means of oral tradition is not like ours. They had the ability to memorize verbatim great narratives, all right? And then they would hand it down to the next generation, and they would memorize. So it was a much more, if you want to use the word accurate, you could use the word accurate, but it's a lot more accurate than we would imagine in our minds, handing down these traditions until they were written down. And then here's another reality, that the oldest manuscripts that we have of the Tanakh are what? What are those manuscripts? They have a name. The what? Are you talking about the Dead Sea? I am. Okay. What is when did we get those, or what is the date of the Dead Sea Scrolls? How old are they?
They're about 1,000 years older than what's in an English Bible.
1,000 years older than what's in an English Bible, which would date them when, approximately? A.D. or B.C.? A little B.C., but only a little. Couple hundred years, okay? Now, those manuscripts are fragments. So it's not like, oh, they have the Old Testament, the whole Tanakh in the Dead Sea Scrolls. No, there are fragments. And in those fragments, there are small, I would call them small, differences in the next manuscripts that we have, which the next manuscripts that we have are only 700 years old. From now, that means way after the time of Jesus are the manuscripts that we have that are the oldest manuscripts that we know of, that human beings hold, of the Tanakh. So that's thousands of years, right? And you know what that does for me? Tells me it's a miracle that I have it. It's a miracle that I have it. It's a miracle that I can read it. And it's a miracle that when I read it, you know what happens? What happens is the Ruach, the Holy Spirit, enlivens you as you read it. And that's what it's all about. And leads you in your relationship. So sometimes we get on these quests to want to know how things work, but we're using our modern Greek mind, and it doesn't work that way. The Bible is not that, okay? So don't make it into that. Let it be what it is. And what it is a miracle. It's magnificent. The number of voices that are in that Bible that have this agreement of there's one God, Yehovah. He created the heavens and the earth. All of it. It's just amazing. So, I guess I could go on and on, but that's good. Anybody else? Something you learned?
I don't know if I could top what Kathy had said. Thank you. That was great. I think it's very important, especially in the world we have today, for people to foundationally know what they believe. Because, unfortunately, there's so much subjective interpretation that look at the amount of different beliefs we have, and they all fall under an umbrella of Christian.
Yep.
But I like telling the willingness to challenge the truth in the faith. So the reason I say it that way is because the Bible, I have done this myself. I've made this not a God in a way, but yes. Look at it. It says this is what it is, and that's all. There's nothing else to it. And unfortunately, despite my full belief of what happened in the seminary that took place, I appreciated that he's willing to challenge a group of people to make sure they know what they believe and why, even if you disagree. And it's very important that ties into my next statement, that you piece together what you believe to be truth and what the Lord has revealed to you and why. Because if you can't establish that, you're just going to be a sheep. And if you are a sheep, you can't stand up for the truth. But be willing, as you go through this journey of life, and I have a great testimony that I won't share here. Pat's been a part of a lot of that, and each of you do, I'm sure. The reason you have a testimony is because of those things. You've been challenged, and you had to stand before him and say, show me the way that I need to be you like you. Show me your truth. Show me the way that your demeanor is, who you are as a person that I'm supposed to implement into society today, and be a shadow of you, basically. So if you let the world morph that, you're just going to look like the world. And he's trying to show that to us in what I thought was a fascinating way about the way that the Bible should be interpreted. I didn't believe all the things he had to say, but I do appreciate what he brought to the table. And while I was challenged, I'm sure everybody else was here as well. So thank you for that.
Good. Can you, here we have Mark would like the mic. Go ahead.
First, I think it was good that we were challenged. I recognized in my own life that I've come a long way since we started down this walk. I recognize, too, that from the seminar, we need to develop discernment to the nth degree. Not because Skip maybe was wrong, but because we need to know what is right.
Yeah.
And
Right.
we get used to the way a person delivers the message
Right.
that the Lord gives them. So we need to hear other people so that
Other
we are
voices.
continuously challenged. And it makes me think, okay, now which one of those 645 or 6,045, whatever that number was, walks of life am I
Right.
really on?
Right.
Well, if I know the scriptures, I know that there's a scripture that says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Okay, did I think of that the other night? Probably not right away, but it did make me think about it. So now I just have to work on getting it cemented so that it comes just click, click, click.
Good.
Because we're to be lights in the world.
Right.
We need to know what we're talking about.
That's right. Very good. Thanks. Good.
I think everybody that just shared is a lot of what I felt, and if I may, kind of piggyback on everybody's comments. Miss Kathy said it, taking the wheat and separating it from the chaff. The way I like to express it is very similar. Take the meat, spit out the bones. No one man has a lock on the truth. I understand that. I did recognize that Skip is speaking from a very wounded position. You know, he's had a lot of
That was
tragedy
obvious
in his
the
life, yeah.
last hour, wasn't it?
right.
I mean, it was obvious the
Yeah.
whole way, but really the last hour.
And there was the challenge. There is growth. Sometimes that growth is painful. I like the thing with the bicycle, the backwards bicycle. So it really kind of got me to do that. And
Yeah.
if you would bear with me for about 2 minutes, I'd like to demonstrate to the group about sometimes when we try to discern or to interpret something. Let me ask you this: has anybody not seen Fiddler on the Roof? Okay, you haven't seen it. Okay, and you haven't seen it. Okay, a
Go
couple of
watch
people.
it tonight.
Yeah. All right. It's probably good to watch. It's kind of a snapshot into their culture at the turn of last century. But there's a scene in there where they're all arguing, right? And that's what Jews like to do. If you put 3 Jews in a room together, you'll get 5 different opinions.
No, you won't. It's 3.
It's 3. Okay? So, and there's a scene in there where they're arguing, and the guy makes a statement. He says, well, you're right. And then the guy that's opposing him says, no, just like what he did, right? And then somebody would say, well, he's right too. Okay. And wait a minute, how can you both be right? Well, you're right too. Okay, so different opinions. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate that. I'm going to ask for a witness. Would you come up here and assist me, Miss Patty? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to
Why
demonstrate
don't you
this.
come right here so the Zoom audience
Oh, okay.
can look at you?
Okay. So now tell me, and then you're going to be, because you established truth by 2 or 3 witnesses, right? All right, so I've got a second witness. I've got a third witness. Now, if you would come and stand behind me as well. All right, so now.
Behind you?
Well, not kind of alongside, so you can see what I'm doing. Okay. All right. Now, I want the group out there to tell me, what do you see? And then you tell me what you see. What do you see? Okay. What's the picture? What is it? What do you see? All right. A dark photograph. What direction is it turning? Okay. You're all wrong. Every one of you is wrong. Because it's not turning counterclockwise, it's turning
Clockwise.
clockwise.
Yeah,
And
right.
there are 16 very ornate photographs on here, but you can't see it.
Well, I'm looking right at it.
You're looking right at it. Okay, but you're looking right at it. So they're right, but you're right too. Okay. Now, oddly enough, this lesson was taught to me years ago when I was here in Alaska back in about 10 years ago. My wife and I took a trip. We were living in Kenai at the time, and we took a trip over to Seward, and we went to this restaurant. It was a creperie, and the proprietor of the restaurant taught me that lesson. And I sat down there, and he's making his crepes, and he kind of motioned over to a table. He had a real stern look on his face. He wasn't from here. I want to say he was from Belgium or some European country over there. But he took an ornate plate, and he did that same thing. And he asked me what I saw. So I said, well, it's an ornate plate with a floral design. It's turning clockwise. And he says, no, you're wrong. You know. And then he gave me the lesson. From his perspective, it was different. But now, are they wrong? Were you wrong? Perspective.
I think
okay?
they were wrong. I think you guys are wrong. No,
Okay.
but you're right. That's
So
very
you gotta
good.
so you gotta look at it. So now Skip's looking at it from a totally different perspective, right?
Mhm.
All right. And even the great sages. He mentioned many times that he's an academician, right? He's way up here. I've only got a 2-year degree, so I'm not in his league by any stretch of the imagination. But, all right, even other academics that are at his level are going to knock heads. The great sages, Maimonides, Nachmanides, the Onkelos, all of those guys, they knocked heads. Okay? So it's about discernment, but it does challenge you. It gets you to dig. Me personally, I felt like I ran a 26-mile marathon with that guy. Okay? He wore me out. All right? But now it's going to challenge me to dig. And the scripture's alive. I mean, it's not a static thing. As I was explaining to Pat before the service, I've been through the Torah cycle about 30 times now. I've been in this walk close to 30 years. And every time I go through the cycle, I learn something new. And when I came into this fellowship, in this class, I'm learning still new stuff. You know.
Cool.
So
Thank you.
there you go.
Thanks, brother. Thank you.
And one more thing.
Hold it right up there. There
One
you go.
more thing that I got from particularly the last night in front of the audience, when Skip really became pretty transparent with us, but just being transparent doesn't get you anywhere. You have to be able to receive help because you've been transparent. So from that, we need to be working on compassion for those who are wounded and don't realize or haven't been able to ask for help. So there's a matter of prayer for each one of us to become compassionate toward
Amen.
others.
It's good. Thank you. Would you mind bringing the mic to Don on your way back there? Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple things. One is what Kathy said, you know, when he said there was the oral word before the written word, and that, you know, most of the scriptures, they're just stories about people and their encounters with God, their relationship and encounters with God. So that kind of, you know, but as he goes on, he quotes scripture. After scripture, he
boom,
goes
boom,
right
boom,
back
boom,
to that.
You noticed.
And, you know, it was just amazing. But I think the other thing that I really got out of it, and I'll study this some more too, because I've never looked at other religions, other religious gods, okay? But when he said, of all these gods out there and all the different religions, that Yahovah is the only one that ever gave instructions on how we are to live. He gave you a
Yes.
set of rules on how to live.
Right.
And that really got me. That was really good.
Good.
That was my
Yep.
big takeaway.
That's a good one. That's a big one. Thanks.
Thank you. I learned a lot. But I'm sitting here hearing the left, right, and center. But center is, to me, walk in the path where Jesus walked.
Yes.
Follow him.
Yes.
And he said in the word that search the scriptures,
Why?
so you will have the knowledge, wisdom.
Well,
and
you
pick up
almost-
everything.
Yep. You almost got it all the way right, because when he used those words, he was arguing with the religious leaders, and he looked at them. He said, "You search the scriptures because you believe that in them you have life." Then he says, but it is they that are witnessing about me. So in other words, your life is not in the scriptures. Your life is in me. Because I am the way, truth, and life. So what that brings up to me, and I hope everybody, is that your Bible is important. It's beautiful. You do not want to live without it. You want to go home and you want to read it. But you got to remember, any idiot can read the Bible. Okay? It's not about reading the Bible. It's about knowing the one that the Bible is leading you to, right? So ultimately, we need to always, in our minds and in our hearts, we need to go back to that. I have a relationship with Yehovah. That's what this is about. And then as I read about the things that I read in the Bible, it's, I hope that it helps me grow in my relationship with Him and grow in my ability to be human, right? So, not a homo sapien, a human being. That's right. Without the Holy Spirit, you're lost. Yep.
Sometimes people who read the Bible
Hold that up.
and
There you go.
criticize what they find, the joke is you shouldn't read other people's mail because it was written for followers. And that's, you should just leave it alone if you're not a follower. If you're only there to find criticism, just you shouldn't read other people's mail.
Funny. Okay. You're nearer.
Okay.
And then I'm going to there.
Okay. I wasn't really clear. Like, I thought that he said that Jesus' crucifixion was for us to become more human.
Yes.
Not about taking on the sin of the world.
Yes.
And I did hear. Okay, I didn't know if I was like busy.
No, you heard it right.
I did hear it right.
Here's another way, okay, and I think these are the words that he used. What Yeshua did on the cross was not about forgiveness. Okay, it wasn't so that you would be forgiven. That's not what was going on. There was something else that was going on. And I might add, since you asked, he writes about it in this book, Crossword Puzzles. Now, I read this a couple years ago, and I remember that I liked it, and then I stuck it back on and then I took it out again today, and I began reading it, and I was like, wow. This is like what Yeshua was doing goes way beyond forgiveness. Okay? You already had you had forgiveness with animal sacrifices. You had forgiveness in the Tanakh. The Tanakh had a way to provide your atonement and your forgiveness. That was already there. Temporary? What do you mean? There's more than one way. Even in the Tanakh, some people were forgiven because they asked. They didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to bring an animal. They didn't have to do any of it. So I highly recommend, of all of his books, I highly recommend this one because I think you're going to know him in a new way. Okay? He's very biblical, very scriptural, very much about what Yeshua is doing on the cross is, number one, he's defeating the devil and he's killing death. Yeah, crossword puzzle. Are you forgiven? Yes. Okay? But there's, it's like we learned that much of it, and it's that big. And what happens is when all we learn and all we hear is, well, he died in order that I could be forgiven. He died in order that I could be forgiven. You miss the ginormous picture. And where he hits it from is the idea that when Yeshua died, if the Jews that were his followers, they didn't understand his death the way that we do in Christianity. Okay, and he explains why. And how they understood it and why it was a very powerful thing that happened. So that's all I'm going to go into now. But yeah, you're right. That's what you heard. And maybe one night, and maybe even Friday night, if we can get there, I'll go over that.
I'd
So
love to
that's a good one.
understand that better.
Yep. Who's next? Debbie. This is a great Torah class. I love it. I love it.
I think I've almost forgotten what I was going to say, but
You'll remember.
yeah. So what I got out of it was Skip brought to the table everything that he has studied to show himself approved. So he's done all this research, he's talked to rabbis, he's read books, he's researched, he's done this and that. And so he brought it to us and he laid it out for us to decide whether we wanted to accept any of it or not. I don't think that he was proclaiming that this is the truth, but he was showing all of us many truths from other people. And so it's up to us to search it out. Also, when he got really, he showed his woundedness, but I think that he was using himself as an example because he had to show us what did he say, naked and afraid? What did that mean? It meant full disclosure or whatever, you know. I think that he had to show us what that meant. So he used himself as an example. And it may have hurt him, and he may have gone to a place he'd been before and he didn't want to go there, but he was stepping out of pride and he wanted to let himself be exposed to show you guys and all of us how to be exposed, how to be naked and afraid. You know?
And that's really good. And I would add, not that what you said matters, and you're very right. And if you think about this, I've never been with him or watched anything that he's ever done where he's ever done that, ever, anywhere. So I was a little bit blown away. I was like, wow. So I don't know. Maybe that means he felt like we were
Safe.
yeah, safe.
To be
Safe.
able to do that.
That's pretty neat. Feel that way. So anyway, okay, let's move on and do a little bit of work in Torah tonight. And by the way, I know James is thinking, well, is truth relative or is it subjective or is it? And my answer is it depends. Okay, what are you? What is your job? What do you do? For a living, what do you do?
What's your profession?
Well, I could say in the Air Force, or I could say I make PowerPoints. I could say
Is that what you do?
defend the homeland.
Yeah. All right. But I know that you are like not an engineer, but you're like somebody who, if you're what you do and accuracy is life. Life is on the line, right? So you don't look at a number and go, well, it's an 8 or a 9 or a 3. I don't know. It doesn't matter as long as it's in the range. No, you want to know right where it is. Okay, like a surgeon. You don't want a surgeon to go, well, you know, your gallbladder is somewhere in here, and I'm going to slice from here to here and look around till I find it, and then we'll yank it out, right? Okay. However, that's one form of truth. There are other forms of truth. Here's an example. I love you. Is it Greek, I love you, or Hebrew, I love you? It's emotion, I love you. Okay? Is that true? Well, yes. How do you put ideas that are relational into words that are factual. Roses are red, violets are blue. Some poems rhyme, but this one doesn't. Who knows the rose? All right, let's look at our Bible reading for the week, which is not a long one. It's the beginning of Deuteronomy. The name in Hebrew is Devarim, which means words. All right, and this is the last book of the Torah, which you remember the names of which all begin with one word that is the beginning words of the book that you're reading. Okay, Genesis is what? In the beginning. Exodus is what? Shemot, the names. Okay, or these are the names. Okay, then what's next? Leviticus. Leviticus is Vayikra, which is and he called. Okay, and then Numbers is Bamidbar, which is in the wilderness. And then Devarim is, these are the words. Okay, put those all together, you have a sentence. In the beginning, these are the names that he called in the wilderness, and these are the words. So all of Torah is one narrative that goes all together. Now, when the rabbis were looking at this and putting this all together, I imagine their minds were blown when they were like, wow, look, it works that way and this way. It's a crossword puzzle. It works more than one direction, all right? In this book, this is when Moses is getting ready to go over and review what has happened in the wilderness. Well, since they left Egypt, he's going to review everything that has happened. Not everything, but he's going to review what has happened since they left Egypt. And the reason is they're getting ready to go into the land. And this is the next generation. So the guys that left Egypt with Moses died out in the wilderness, and now this is their children that are getting ready to go in and inherit the land. So what is he going to do? He's going to review where they've been and what they have done and the Torah. Well, I thought all of it was the Torah. Well, yes and no. Okay, what does Torah mean? Teachings and instructions. So in that way, in the world of Judaism, 5 books, the first 5 are known as Torah. And is there teaching and instruction in the story of Abraham? Yes. You can glean out of that how Yehovah relates to you by looking at how Yehovah relates to Abraham, okay? But that's not like direct instruction. Like, this is what I want you to do, this is what I don't want you to do, okay? So in Torah, you have many Torahs, okay? You have little sections that are like direct instruction, like what? Like what's one that you think of? The commandments, the words, the 10 words. Those are direct instruction for Israel about what to do and what not to do. Okay? When you look at Abraham's life and you look at the narrative of Abraham's life, do you learn about what to do and what not to do? Yeah, a little bit, maybe. Okay? You learn that there's a lot of family dynamics that look a lot like our family dynamics. Because you start reading all those stories, those narratives, those stories, and you start thinking, well, I start thinking, because I had this image in my mind that if you only do X, Y, and Z, and you do it right, then your family will look like this, right? Leave It to Beaver, right? Or Ozzie and Harriet, or you guys aren't that old, are you? My 3 sons, na 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 na. The Brady Bunch, the Brady Bunch. It'll look like one of those. Okay, not the more modern ones. because they're like our own families. But in the Bible, it's not like that. In the Bible, it is no Brady Bunch. It is a mess. And you look at that and you go, well, all right, there's a little bit of messiness in our own lives, isn't there? So we can learn that God works with that, right? Okay. Now, in chapter 1, verse 5 of Deuteronomy, you read this: across the Jordan in the land of Moab. Okay, tells you where they are. Moses began to explain this Torah. In other words, this teaching, saying. Okay, now hold on right there, because now we're going to look at the Aleph Tav. Because right in the middle of that verse, there are these letters, Aleph and Tav. And if you look in your notes, you can look at what they look like in the Hebrew. This is not ancient Hebrew, this is biblical Hebrew, which is modern Hebrew that you're looking at, okay? See them in their bolden in there. And it reads right to left. 2 letters. The Aleph looks a little bit like an X, okay? Kind of sitting on the side, the Aleph. And the Tav looks like this, okay? That's the first and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet or alphabet, okay? Now, literally, that would be the Torah, Aleph Tav, make plain Moshe. So Hebrew order of words is not like English order of words. Skip brought that up with the word syntax. Okay, it's just a word order, and it's not like in English. Okay, now, the Aleph Tav is a word, but it's never translated into English or any other language. In the Hebrew language, it is a grammatical marker that lets you know that the next word is going to be the direct object of the main verb. Did that go to anybody? Okay, because you don't remember your grammar from 8th grade or whatever, right? Okay, a lot of you do. You have verbs and nouns and direct objects and all that. So it's a grammatical marker in the text, and Skip brought that up, right? But what we know, what we realize is that there are some rabbis who have found another meaning in the Aleph Tav, in that it means beginning and the end. Okay? Now, if we who are Messianics, and we have the book of Revelation, and we know in the book of Revelation, Yeshua says, I am the beginning and the end, the Alpha and Omega. In English, it would be the A and the Z. In Hebrew, it would be the Aleph and the Tav. In Spanish, it would be the A and the Zeta? Okay. You get the idea, right? Okay. And that idea of being the beginning and the end, there are a lot of Hebrew sages that believe that the world, the universe, the heavens and the earth are built on the Hebrew alphabet. Okay, so if you go back to the very beginning and you go back to Genesis, there's all of this alphabet work that you can look at and you can do with the words in Genesis. Okay, now remember when you learned there were thousands of ways of looking at the scripture? That's another way of looking at the scripture, is looking at the alphabet and the ancient meanings of the word, not of the letters. Not just the letters like Aleph, but what is Aleph? Well, in the ancient language, there was a picture language. The Aleph was what? Picture of a bull or an ox with horns. And it meant strong leader, like a bull, okay? And Tav looked like an X. Somebody just made a mark, okay? And it means a mark or a sign or a covenant, okay? So you have the strong leader of the covenant is the Aleph Tav, which is the Alpha and the Omega. So let me ask you, is Yeshua the Alpha and the Omega? Okay? All right. Is the Alpha and the Omega, the strong leader of the covenant. So it works. Right? Okay, now, what people will do is, like, there's a guy that made a whole Bible that I have up in my office called the Et Sefer Bible. And he has all of the appearances of the Aleph Tav. However, the problem is it's in English. So you'll be reading along in English, and then you'll have the mark. And then you'll read a little more, and you'll have the mark. And it's very hard to read on the one hand. But there are other things about that, okay? So, the Aleph Tav is written and occurs about 9,392 times in the Tanakh, okay? And it reminds us that the Messiah is in the midst of the Torah. Okay, now I'd like to bring something else up that is related to something that Skip said, and please don't think that for the next year all you're going to hear from me is, well, Skip said, well, Skip said, well, Skip said. Okay, but this is something that Skip brought up, and I want to bring it up, okay? He said, if you have a paradigm, whenever you look at whatever it is you're looking at, you're going to look at it through that paradigm, right? Okay, and I would say yes, and it's good that you are aware of your paradigm, but that does not mean that your paradigm is wrong. Okay, just because you have one doesn't mean that it's wrong. There's nobody that doesn't have one. Nobody. Okay, all of us have a way that we read, we have an understanding that we bring. I think what matters is that you're aware of it and that you realize, maybe, what if in my paradigm I'm not really hearing and reading what's really there, because I'm filtering it all through these doctrinal ideas that I got in Christianity. Yeah, okay? Be able to take those lenses off. But that doesn't mean that everything about it is wrong. Okay, so I don't want you to hear that, all right? There are other readings that you can do that are listed there if you want. One is wildbranch.org. Brad Scott, who is no longer alive on earth, but he was here about 8 years ago, I think, Brad Scott, and he's at Olive Branch. And then He That Has an Ear, very interesting readings. And then Torah Apologetics. And he does not agree with you or us. So it's there. So you can read them all and see what you think. Okay?
See, that's a classic case of what I was demonstrating from our perspective.
Totally. Yes.
So we were right, they were right. They were both right.
Like what? What do you mean, James? Yeah, but you're okay. You know this. You're brilliant. Brilliant, and you're right.
So the point being is, if you get just a pure academic, he's going to say, yeah, that's just
That's a grammatical mark. But if you get a Zohar reader, do you know what the Zohar is?
yes.
Zohar is a branch of Judaism. Zohar is a book, okay? But it's a branch of Judaism that's mystical, all mystical, okay? A lot of these ideas, like the ideas of the gematria and the numberings, are leaning on the mystical end of Judaism, okay? That doesn't mean that it's wrong. I'm just letting you know it's mystical. And sometimes things that are mystical make those of us who are logical and rational go, I don't know about that. Yes? Kabbalah is related to that. Yeah, yeah. Right. Yeah.
Zohar, that word is in Genesis when Noah cut the hole in the top of the ark. The word for window.
Zohar. Isn't that interesting? A window that you look through the window, and there's more truth that is revealed. Okay? Something else we must remember, all right? In Judaism, there are 4 levels, if you will, of looking at any verse, okay? At least. You have the meaning, that's the literal meaning, okay? The pshat meaning. Okay, then you have a remez. Remember that? Remez is hints of ideas that you get out of reading the verse. Okay, then you have a darash, darash, where we get the word midrash, where you let the verse take you into ideas that are allegorical or even mystical. And then you have the last level is sod, and that's like all mystical. Okay? And if you were to look at one of those and go, oh, he's making a remez, rather than he's giving you a literal yada, 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 all right, and you only looked at it in your normal Western logical mind, you would ask, what in the world are they doing? They're not following the verse. That is not what the verse means. So just be aware of that.
So Messianic Jews read the Bible all 4 ways?
Okay, Messianic Jews, okay, there's, yes, some of them do, yes. Some of them do, some of them don't. Some of them probably don't even know enough about that. So you can be a Messianic Jew and have never really been involved in your Judaism, and then you get involved in, because, you get a new birth from above, and you trust Yeshua, and then you begin walking with him, and you're like, wow, look at what I was missing. But you might be Jewish, but you might not know all that. So you might be an Orthodox Jew that knows all of that, and then you meet Yeshua, and then, yes, you're going to keep reading the Bible that way and keep making all of those interpretations. And by the way, in the book of Galatians, Paul does it. There's an example of him making a midrash that when I read that, or when anybody that I know that's a Christian reads that, they always get it wrong because it doesn't make any sense. And I kept reading it and going, what are you saying? What are you saying? It doesn't make any sense. I don't get it. And then when I realized it was a midrash, it was like, I get it now. Okay, it's the whole thing about Sarah and the mountain in Arabia. And then Sarah is anyway, I'll go over that another day. But yeah, Paul is a rabbi. And he's a Jewish rabbi, and he knew all of these ways of interpreting the Bible. So he does it. In Galatians, he does it. He does it in Romans. Okay, you remember in Romans where you read about this law? But if somebody dies, they're no longer under the law. Okay, I think it's in Romans 7. It says if the individual dies, they're no longer under the law. What law? That's what you have to ask. Because to us, in English, the law always means Torah. He wasn't talking about Torah. He was talking about one ruling in Torah that had to do with divorce or the husband dying. And if the husband dies, then the woman is no longer bound according to that law in Torah. It didn't mean the woman is no longer bound to Torah. It meant that law has released her. And then it changes the whole way you read that statement in Romans. So it's like, wow, have I ever got a lot to learn? Which is, hallelujah. Patricia. No, Z-O-H-A-R. Z-O-H-A-R. Zohar. Okay, well, time's up. No, I'm kidding. Okay. Now, very interesting interesting that Yeshua, the Alpha and Omega, says in John, he says this to the religious leaders. Okay, and I love this translation of it. This is the tree of life. He says, "For if you were believing Moses, you would believe me, because he wrote about me. But since you don't believe his writings, how will you believe my words?" Now, he's speaking to the religious leaders, telling them that they don't believe Moses. Probably wasn't taken very well. They probably didn't take very well to that. But notice in almost all English translations, what you read there is, "For if you believe or believed Moses." But this one uses the infinitive with the ing. If you were believing. Biblical trust has an ing on it. It's ongoing. If the ing is not there and it's something you once did, but you're not right now, then you're not. Get it? So he said that. He said you're either in or you're not. You either trust or you don't. There's no little bit. There's no either yes or no. Either you are believing in this moment, you are believing, or you're not. And if you're not, then you're not. Now, the truth is, maybe a lot of us are in and out. Okay? Or a lot of us maybe move in and out during the early days, but even when we're having struggles with our trust, it doesn't mean that we're not believing. We're believing, but we're having doubts. Can you believe and have doubts? Of course. But remember what doubt is. Doubt's a mind thing. Okay, so how do you know if you're believing? If I am going to walk from here to that door because I believe that I can make it to that door, and I begin walking to that door, and from when I get right about where Patty is, my mind starts going, you're not going to make it to that door. You're going to go off the line, and you're going to, you don't even know if that door is really there. So what's going on in here is doubt. But I'm not unbelieving unless I stop walking. As long as I keep walking, I'm believing. So what I'm getting at is you can walk the walk and have doubts in your mind, which ought to be a comfort to us. You can get rid of the doubts in your mind. They don't need to be there, but you don't need to go berserk because you have doubts. Yes?
So keep your focus on
The door.
the way.
Where you're walking, on the way. Exactly.
Because once the things of the world or everyday life enter in, well, you kind of deviate this way,
Yes.
deviate that
That's
way,
right.
and gotta get back on that path.
Back on the way. Back on the way and walking. And, your mind matters. Your thoughts are very important. Actions often begin in your thoughts. However, don't elevate your thoughts above your actions. God is more interested in your actions than he is your thoughts. Yes. Yep. That's right. Right. So it's not. So you get that? Okay. All right. Now, moving on a little bit. This is what Yeshua was talking about that. Deuteronomy, as you read Deuteronomy, I think what you're going to find out is the Messiah is all over it. So when Yeshua looks at the religious leaders and goes, hey, if you were believing Moses, you'd be believing me because Moses wrote about me. You're going to find that out in Deuteronomy, that Moses is writing about Yeshua over and over and over again. Can you think of an example? It's an explicit example in Deuteronomy where Moses writes about Yeshua. Yes, when he when he writes, there will be a prophet that will be like me. I don't know. Good question, but you got it right. Right answer. Ting. Okay, there will be a prophet that will be like me. Listen to him. Okay, which in Hebrew would be Shema, him. Okay, so here's Yeshua coming along, going up a mountain and giving Torah from the mountain. Sermon on the Mount. Just like Moses. Okay? And there's other things that are built around that whole idea of Moses and Yeshua being the second Moses. Gosh, there was one that was right here in my mind, and it just went, ping. It's later in Matthew. I don't know. It may come back at some point. Okay, Deuteronomy 1:1 begins, these are the words, Devarim, that Moses spoke to all Israel across the Jordan in the wilderness. Okay, you already know the word is Devarim, and Devarim is plural of Debar, which is the word word. It sounds funny. Used in Deuteronomy over 50 times. And the ancient pictograph meaning of the word Debar, of the word word, is the entrance to the house of the highest. Cool. So words are really important in Torah. How were the heavens and the earth created? By the words of Yehovah, right? How are you and I going to be judged? By the words that you speak. Wait a minute, I thought we were going to be judged by our actions. Both. Yay! Yes, Brad Scott. Yeah. Yes. That's Genesis 1:1. You're right. You're absolutely right. That's in the very beginning. You know what she means? The Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim et haaretz. In the beginning, okay? The first letter in the Bible is the word beit, which is a picture of a house. Okay? God is building a house. What goes in a house? Family. God is making a family to go into the house. Okay, that's what the Bible's all about. So, cool. Very good. Okay, John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. We could go days on that one verse. What is it in the Greek? What is it in the Hebrew? What is it in the Latin? What is it in the Aramaic? What is the Word? What is the Logos? Is the Logos the divine Memra? What is the Memra? Yada, 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 yada. There's a lot there in that verse, all right? If you look at it the easy way, Devarim, words, okay? Devarim, Torah, all right? In the beginning was Torah, God's teachings and instructions, God's view, God's perspective, all of that, okay? And the Torah was made flesh and dwelt among us, right? So that makes Yeshua the living Torah. What does that mean? Well, that's easy. That means he's walking it out. He's walking the way perfectly. You guys hear a knocking noise? Oh, okay. It's not me. I thought it would. Come on in. That's not you up there, is it? Knocking. It's like it's up behind me, but what is a little bit troubling me is what's right there is my office, and my door is locked. So I'm like, why is somebody... Anyway, let's move on. Okay, so what I did in your notes is I gave you a lot of examples of the word, devarim, and how often it's used in Deuteronomy. Okay, for example, Deuteronomy 5:19. These words Adonai spoke to all of your assembly. Okay, so the book is all about God's words. Okay, on your notes, I'm on 3 in my notes, Deuteronomy 1:2, where we read, it is 11 days' journey from Oreb by the way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. Okay, what is Horeb? What is that? That's Mount Sinai. That's the mountain of God, the mountain where they went. When they went out of Egypt, they went to the mountain. This was the mountain where they went, right? Okay. So how many days did it take them to get to that mountain from Egypt? It's like a couple months, right, to get to that mountain from Egypt. But what he's telling them is from that mountain where you guys or your ancestors, your forefathers got the commandments, the 10 words, from that mountain to here where the promised land is 11 days. How long did it take them to get there? 40 years. So that's like going to Talkeetna via Berlin, right? You know, like, I don't know. I know it's over there somewhere. I got to get on a boat or whatever. Okay, and then you read back in Numbers where he said that those that were alive and rejected his telling them to go into the land were going to die. And then in that verse in Numbers, you read that they have tested me these 10 times. What are those? Well, I listed them there for you. So this is all of the moments where they tested Adonai, Yehovah, on the way out of Egypt. Okay? Now, this reading falls during the Jewish week of the 9th of Av. Okay? Av is a month. It's the name of a Hebrew month. If you got one of those calendars, you can look it up right now. Okay? And it is a tradition, it's an oral tradition in Judaism, that the 9th of Av is the day when the Israelites did not go into the land, when they were supposed to go into the land. And since that day, there have been weird happenings on the 9th of Av. So, they have a mourning that happens during the period of Av, where the 9th of Av is, that mourns over things that have happened in their history that have been tragic. And I gave you a list of certain things that happened in their history. And I have my own feelings about that. My own opinion about that is I'm not convinced that that matters, that the 9th of Av matters. Okay, I think it matters from looking back on an historical perspective and going this, but I think for everybody to begin getting worried and all, whoa, it's the 9th of Av, to me is a little bit superstitious. Okay, if you're walking with Yehovah, why are you worried about the 9th of Av or any other day for that matter, right? Just walk.
About the 11-day versus 40 years.
Uh-huh.
I think that the explanation should be given. That is he like awarding them lotto great sums of money? They just lose it and have their life ruined.
Yeah. Yes, you may be right, but he didn't even let him go in.
And there's a verse in the Bible that if you got the wild ant beast would destroy you.
Yes.
You weren't ready. It wasn't ready. You weren't ready, and it couldn't happen.
Okay. Patricia?
They were acting as goats, not sheep, because
They were acting like goats, not sheep, yeah. Right. What did they really want? What did they want? What did they want? No. They didn't want a new life. They wanted their old life. They wanted to go back to Egypt. Yeah, yeah. Hmm? Well, I think they were willing to go back as slaves because they thought that was better than this wilderness journey that Moses has brought us on. And now we're going to have to go into this land and beat up these giants, and there's no way we're going to be able to do that, even though the God who's with us is the one that we watch the water go, and we watched all the gods of Egypt fall, and he gave us something to eat, and he gave us water to drink, and our shoes didn't wear out, and here we are, and yet, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going in there, okay? I was thinking about that today, earlier today. My wife and I were on a walk, and we were talking about this, and we were talking about logic and reason versus other truth, okay? And my wife is very logical. She's a very logical woman, a very logical, reasonable woman. I can be logical and I can be illogical. I can swing both ways, all right? And I was saying, well, you know, if all we were was logical and rational and reasonable, none of us would leave our house. Why? Because it's a risk. Because whenever you leave, you might die. You might get run over. You might get a disease. You might on down the line, yada, yada, yada. Not only would you not leave your house, you know, you'd barely leave your living room. Because I hear most accidents happen in the home. So, you get it? It's like there's risk in life. And sometimes when people are overwhelmed with fear, they're not willing to risk at all. Right? So, you mean I want resurrection and all that? Yeah. Yep, yep. So that's right. They want fire insurance is what they want. So, well, and see, this is a big deal. Okay, I'm glad you brought that up because this is a big deal. And Skip mentioned it. He's not the only one that has mentioned it. Has anybody ever read the works of C.S. Lewis? Okay, his book, Mere Christianity, is one of the best books I've ever read, in spite of the fact that it's not in a denomination that I've ever been in. And yes, it's like got the Christian lens and everything, but not all of it, because it's just good. And in that, he kind of bashes this idea that when you die, you get to go to heaven, and heaven's going to be this nice la-la land, and in that moment, all of your imperfections are going to be washed away, and you're going to be, Lewis, he says no. He says, I think what happens is, however you lived your life is what you are forever. Yikes. Uh-oh. Uh-huh. Yeah. Forever, whatever that means. Okay? And to realize that this is not like some guy said to me once, the Bible is not basic instructions before leaving earth. Okay, that is not right. The Bible is your instruction manual for while you're on earth in order to have a life that is meaningful, purposeful, and brings God's glory into the world. So, sure. Well, it is interesting. And, you know, you got to remember that a lot of things are going on in the mind and in the body at the end that are things firing off, and you never know. It's a little bit like a woman who's ready to have a baby and has done all the practice and gotten it all ready, and then about 10 seconds into labor, pain number 1 goes, nope, can't do this. Not going to be able to do this, okay? It's like, yeah, you are. It's not going to be easy, but you'll be able to do it, so. Isn't that something? Elizabeth, go ahead.
If you have kept short accounts, done your repenting and your forgiving of things that have happened in life, when you pass, it'll be easy. Have not, there's a
Yeah.
incontinence of mind,
Yes.
emotion.
Yes.
It does come out.
Yep.
And that's what they see in a lot of people when they're dying.
Yeah. So that means get rid of your bitterness and your anger and your jealousy and your envy and, get rid of it. You can get rid of it. You don't have to live that way. I love that. I love that about Wellspring. It's like a motto. You don't have to live that way. So that people don't always take that the right way when they come up and they go, hey man, I'm blah, blah, blah. And I go, well, you don't have to live that way. They're like, what, are you judging me? I said, no, you're judging you. You're the one that's complaining. So I'm just letting you know you don't have to live that way.
Some woman said that's all she had.
Mm.
She said, give it up.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
That's
Really strict.
kind of demonic, isn't it? Okay, other words. What I bring out here is other words and Hebrew words. One of them is the most important word, probably one of the most important words, Shema, which means hear and obey. Shema is used over 80 times in Deuteronomy. Okay, the word shamar, which means guard, okay, and protect, that word is used 73 times in Deuteronomy. And the word barit, which is cut, which is where we get our word covenant, because it had to do with the cutting of an animal. Okay, that word is mentioned. And the word love, which in Hebrew is aheb, all right, which is the action of loving, to love. Okay, and Yehovah is building a house of love. And then the last word I brought up in the introduction is the word zakar, which means remember. Okay, and I know I've mentioned over and over again in Torah how important remembering is, right? I think Dennis Prager brings that up in his Torah comments, that remembering and gratitude are the foundation of living a life with God. Okay, remembering and gratitude. Remembering, what do you remember? Well, here's what Israel is told to remember. Number one, remember Yehovah's mighty works. Remember what he has done. Did you know what he has done in your life? There's no argument about that. Doesn't matter what your theology is. If you have had an experience with God where God has healed you or delivered you or brought you something that you needed, that you knew was a miracle, there's no arguing with that. I mean, somebody can try, like, oh, well, that really didn't happen. But you know, as well as I know, there's no arguing with what he has done. Okay, remember Shabbat and that day that is to be remembered forever. Okay, remember Yeshua's covenant, because he did, when he said, whenever you do this, do it and remember me. Do it in memory or remember me. Remember your mistakes and learn from them. In Deuteronomy 9:7, we read, "Remember, never forget how you provoked Adonai your God to wrath in the wilderness." So it's like, remember when you blew it, all right, and learn. Don't just remember and then regret. Remember, ask God to forgive you, forgive you, and then learn, right? That's what we teach our children, right? Remember Yehovah's teachings and do them. I would say remember them by doing them. Now, you know, that's the end of the notes, so you have them, you can read them. You know that God in His Word has given us a memory device, memory devices that are beautiful. Okay? Well, what are they? God's beautiful memory devices. The Moedim. Okay? The days. What do you do on those days? You remember. How do you remember? You remember with your mouth. You remember with your eyes by reading. You remember with your actions by building a tent or building a fire or blowing a trumpet or eating a lamb or whatever it is. And when you do that every year, okay, and again and again and again, it literally builds the story of the Bible into your life over and over and over again. Now, there are other things that He's given us and ways of remembering, but those, to me, are the biggest, most beautiful ones. So, repeat and repeat. Very good. 2 birds sitting on a fence. All right, well, that's all for tonight. That's all, folks. May you have a great week, the rest of the week, and we'll see you Friday night for follow-up. Does anybody, Lord willing, does anybody else want to order one of those Bible journals? Write your name on there and get it done. Bless you all.